fine for a class about movies. You know, here we are. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to our review session. We are now at midterm, so let's just jump into this and get to find out what's going to be on the midterm, find out how it works and all that. So, first thing you want to know is, when is it? Well, it's next week. It's 1 week. I have it up, or have it available for you, that is, over in the testing lab. So it starts Thursday this week, the 6th, and then it'll work its way through the 13th. So it ends on Thursday. So you will have, you know, plenty of time to take it. It's in the testing lab. A word to the wise, it's probably a good thing if you can make it on the Saturday to do it then, because you'll have plenty of time to get there and all of that sort of thing. But do check the website, the testing lab website, for their hours of operation. So what am I talking about there? We're talking about the Social Science Testing Lab. That's the center building, 456 over there. Probably you've been there and maybe you haven't. But that's where it's done. What will it be like? It will be a computer exam. It's an objective test, obviously. There will be 50 questions, okay? And all of them will deal with what we have covered from day one through this week. And I'll cover that as we get going here. I'll give you a little more information about that. But it is an objective exam, so there's no written questions, so you don't have to write essays or short answer. It's all computer, or all objective. And good news is that you are allowed one 3x5 note card in the testing center. Now, I mentioned that during the orientation session, and it's their rule, and so what that means is we have to follow their rules. So it's one 3x5. It can't be any larger than that. So it's one 3x5 card, but you can put whatever you need to answer it, you know, to answer to help you with the test. You can put it on both sides, write it upside down, inside out, write it in code. Well, no, don't do that. Don't write it in code, because they will question you on that. So you'll just have to write notes to yourself that other people would be able to recognize. But anyway, it's one, and I have to emphasize the one, because I've had students bring in more than one and they're kicked out. And that's the testing lab rules. I have no control over that. That's their rules. And so if you get kicked out, don't call me. It's a problem, your problem and the testing lab, between the two of you, and they're not going to bend an inch. So it is one 3x5 card. All right. Study guides are now available on Moodle. If you go to the Moodle site, you'll be able to download the study guide. It has the information about what will be on this exam, and I'll amplify a little bit about that for tonight. But it's essentially, the study guide, what's there is essentially what I'm going to ask you about on the test. It's not an answer sheet, but it gives you the material that you should know. And again, that's what I said during the orientation session, that the stuff that you do know, the stuff that it just comes easy for you, you don't have to worry about that. But it's the stuff that can be confusing, and there are things, all of us fall into that trap, where I'll never get, you know, whatever, f-stop right or whatever. Of course, this isn't a photography class, but if you run into those little things like that, that's what you use the note card for. That's when it is to help you to, you know, to refresh your memory on that and say, yeah, you know, I'm not going to get this right. What I used during the orientation session was aspect ratio, and they talk about that later. But they do talk about what, you know, the size of the screen and the ratio, 2.5 to 1, or is it 2.55, that kind of thing. And if that gets confusing, if it really gets confusing as to what aspect ratio is, that's the kind of stuff that you write down on the note card. The stuff that you know, and so many people that take this class are movie buffs anyway. And so when they go through the movies, they go, I know all that stuff. I already know that. You know, then you don't have to worry about it. So anyway, on Moodle right now, you can get the study guides. I also emphasize that it's you, not me, who are responsible for your exam. It is your responsibility to make the exam date and time. So just make sure and check their hours at their website. There it is on the screen. And it's in the syllabus, but check their website because they will give you when they're open. And remember, I don't know why I have to keep emphasizing this, but I do. Remember, if they close at 5 o'clock, that means it's probably a good idea for you to get there before 5 o'clock and not 5 minutes to 5 o'clock. Like maybe 4 o'clock if you're really good at it or whatever. It won't take you very long to take the test. But anyway, don't run into those problems like that where you can't take the test because you weren't there on time, or you can't take the test because you brought 46,000 note cards with you, that sort of thing. Just don't fall into that. And I know all of you are looking at me like, huh? Well, I know, because you're all such smart individuals here. I don't have to remind you people about this, but you'd be surprised. Well, never mind. Okay, we move on. No makeup examinations. That is, don't call me and tell me that your grandmother died again, and so you can't take it next week. There'll be no makeup exams. The only kind of makeup exams are the ones that are according to the discipline that you find in the college. So no makeup exams. And, okay, what are we going to cover? All right. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to cover what we started with, which was the classic Hollywood style, and it'll go through the romantic comedy. So, know these things. An overview of the American movie industry, which is essentially those three things: production, distribution, exhibition. In other words, what that means is that Hollywood produces movies, they distribute movies to theaters, and exhibition is where you see them. So it's production, distribution, exhibition. The other part of that overview is the industry's use of genre to minimize financial risk. If one movie succeeds, many more will also succeed. We know that. It was when Star Wars was released in 1977, it had been a long dry spell for science fiction films. Star Wars came out, and then all of a sudden there were 1 million movies that were very similar to that, and all of them where the producers consistently said, oh no, we didn't steal anything, we didn't copy any idea, we had this in mind long before. Right. I remember that was a TV series called Battlestar Galactica, that the producer was out there marching around the block 20 times yelling over and over again, we had this in development before, we didn't steal anything, this is, blah, blah, blah. But that's part of this minimizing financial risk. One movie makes it, many more will also make it. And you just hope you get in at the beginning of that trend. You don't want to get in there at the end when everybody's finally fed up with it. Okay, the history of the motion picture, early projection technology, and persistence of vision. Persistence of vision is that theory out there that we have a series of still frames that are moving past that lens. That projector is projecting that, and that gives the illusion of movement. That's persistence of vision. We have 24 frames per second because that was sound. That was reproduced sound at its best fidelity if you ran it that fast. That's the only reason it's 24 frames per second. Understand the key innovations and the individuals involved. Recognize what a kinetoscope is. Know who Edison was and his pal, sort of, Dixon. Rivals, actually. Nickelodeon era. The beginnings of that is the beginnings of the movie theaters. the MPPC, which is the Motion Picture Patents Corporation, which is the Edison's group, which we'll talk about in a moment, and the development of the huge movie palace, a place of fantasy where you can go to watch movies. Okay, the classical narrative style. This is very significant here. This is the ways in which cinematic stories are told. And these are the significant points right here. The first one is equilibrium and disruption. What is that? Well, according to our book, it is an initial state of affairs is introduced after which something occurs to disturb this equilibrium. In other words, everything's fine. Everything is normal. There is no problems. Everything is fine. Okay, that's the initial state of affairs that is given to us, and then something occurs that disturbs that, what they call equilibrium. And it is disrupted by any number of things. It could be people. It could be nature. It could be anything you could think of that could disrupt the natural order of things. Then the subsequent events attempt to restore the original status quo, but this is repeatedly frustrated, and order is recovered only at the end of the film. If your movie runs for half an hour, it's going to get restored in half an hour. If your movie runs for 90 minutes, like most Hollywood films, in the classical sense, then it's going to be restored in 90 minutes. And everything between that disruption and that restoration, all it is hills and valleys. It is, we succeeded here at this little moment, and but we've taken 3 steps forward, but we've also taken 2 steps backwards. Okay, then the next one is problem solving. Problem solving, what is that? Well, problem solving is this. Over the course of the narrative, characters struggle to achieve their goals or solve their problems. They overcome those who stand in their way, that is, good guys versus bad guys, triumph over adverse circumstances. That might even be stories like weather related. It might be the story of what was it? Twister, was that the name of that thing several years ago, where it was man against twisters, that sort of thing, and or transcend their own limitations. In many films, it is overcoming myself. I am my main problem. I've got the problem. Intense character studies. Okay, then temporal and spatial limits. These are, temporal dimension is this: a specific deadline has to be met, or a certain task has to be completed by a definite time. All right, time is involved here with when we talk about temporal. It is, I've got to get the mail through by the overland stagecoach, in 3 days, or else we lose it all. Or in that movie DOA, I've got to find my killer before I die. Late 1940s film with Edmund O'Brien called DOA, which takes place pretty much in his lifetime. That is, what's left of his life, because he's been poisoned, but he's going to find the killer. He's going to find the guy that did me in. And he's got to do it, of course, before he dies. Then there's spatial dimension, characters moving toward precise destinations or geographical goals. In my first example, the Western, where we got to get the mail through in 3 days, on the overland stage route, well, part of that is also the spatial dimension, because we got to get from point A to point B, and it's all the problems we encounter in trying to get from point A to point B. We've got weather, we've got Indians, we've got outlaws, we've got all of these obstacles. Okay, and then the journey, very mythic here. The journey, the narrative. Characters move not only spatially, but they realize other non-spatial goals as well. such as making deadlines, solving mysteries, falling in love, discovering new worlds, and coming to terms with themselves and or their fellow travelers. So essentially, what Hollywood film depicted is a journey. And the journey is just what it says right there. The journey is all of these, it's an odyssey. We're winding our way from this point to that point, which is from this point here, which is disruption, which has occurred, to success, which is bringing equilibrium back to society, or back to me, or back to my fellow traveler, or I'm doing it for someone else. It's all of those things. Now, our series also talks about the audience's journey, going to the movies. What we see on the screen is what we are doing at that very moment, looking for goals, participating in deadlines, and undertaking journeys. We go with the characters. I think that's a crucial difference, and our series implies it. They don't really come out and state it, but I think that is a crucial difference in going to the movies to watch a movie versus staying home watching a television program, because you actually make the effort to go. You journey to that theater. Now, back with the golden age, back when they had movie palaces, you actually go to a fantasy land, this beautiful palace, and you get in there, and then you participate with this giant screen, humongous screen inside this humongous building with this unbelievable sound system, and you are taken away with them. It's quite an adventure. Okay, and finally, segmentation. Aristotle's traditional unities, or not. Segmentation is the process of structural analysis that breaks the film down into its basic narrative units. The dramatic unities, according to Aristotle, are action, time, and space. But most films violate the traditional unities and lend themselves to segmentation. Each film is broken down into segments. We even know this. I mean, this is how we make films. They are segments. They are pieces of a total that get assembled later. And it's even different, you know, for stage actors on a stage, it's very linear. You start here at the beginning and you end here at the end of the play. And you don't do bits and pieces in between that are out of sequence. In making films, you often do. You might film, you know, the way they make films, you break it down into its segments and you realize that this movie is going to be 2 hours long, and we know that the movie begins in this location and it ends in this location. So when we film this thing, we film the first scene on day one, and we film the last scene on day one. And then we'll do all the other things. Okay, so it's out of sync as such, but it all comes together at the end and creates for us a whole. Okay, classical film style, film techniques in relationship to narrative. Understand these terms, understand these things. Mise en scène. That is what you see within the frame. That's all it is. Everything that's within that frame, nothing else. Within the frame. Camera movement, the movement techniques. You know, we can take that camera and we can move it laterally with figures, which is like a dolly shot, or sometimes a traveling shot. Or we can also move the camera on the Z-axis, moving towards you. And what do you have there? Again, it's like a dolly shot. Okay, we can also keep the camera on the tripod and we pivot. Panning shots or tilting shots up and down. We can put it literally on a crane and move the whole thing into the sky. And now, of course, they put them on those, what are those, I forgot what they call those crazy things now that they, you know, you go to ball games and all of that, they got them hanging over you in concerts, those things. And especially when your camera's only this big now. But at any rate, it's the different ways of moving it. Lighting, the different types and effects of lighting. Three-point lighting, of fill, the fill lights, the backlight, those kinds of things. Keep that in mind. Sound, all the things that are involved with sound. That includes the hardware, the mics that are used, but also the mixing of sound, where you don't need to record crickets and all that stuff, because the sound person is going to mix those in. Scoring, the music, how significant music is. Okay, the difference between a shot and a scene. The first dramatic unit, that's to emphasize here. The first dramatic, that's the key word right there. Dramatic, dramatic, over and over again, I will say it. The first dramatic unit, the dramatic unit of a film is called the scene. All right? The shot is turning the camera on and turning the camera off. But the dramatic unit is the scene. Scene editing, between and within scenes. Hollywood produces what we call invisible editing, which means they're cutting within scenes. They're going from long shot to close up, or, well, long shot, medium shot, close shot, extreme close shot, over-the-shoulder shot, back and forth, all this kind of stuff. That's invisible editing. We just kind of get used to it. And if you grow up on that, you don't even see it. That's why they call it invisible editing. Also, what kind of editing are with between scenes? We don't use dissolves anymore as like they used to. Instead, we use what's called the jump cut. Scene organization, linear, circular flashbacks. How do they organize these things? Cross-cutting. Remember, cross-cutting are things that are going on simultaneously. Things that are going on. The famous thing about, what cross-cutting is, think of a chase. Think of the great chase, where you are cutting from the cowboys coming to the rescue, the woman's tied to the railroad tracks, the cowboys are coming to rescue her, the train's coming at the same time, and you cut among those things, but they're all happening at the same time. Point of view editing. Okay, that's a given. And the 180-degree rule, that's a technical thing, and that's a filmmaking thing. Don't worry too much about that. Don't cross the line is what they call that. Okay, the studio system. The Motion Picture Patents Company, that's Edison's group, first group of movie company. The key players in the creation of the early studio system: William Fox, Carl Laemmle, Louis B. Mayer, Samuel Goldwyn, Marcus Lowe. These are the founders of Hollywood. Strategies of control. It's an oligopoly. It's that vertical integration. That's what we started with. That's production, distribution, exhibition. They own all of those things. Have an understanding of what blind booking and block booking are. Recognize zones and runs and clearances. And then also, the movies broadened because of the Sherman antitrust ruling against the MPCC in 1915. The 5 major studios out there: Paramount, Loews, which owns MGM. Loews is actually a movie theater company. It holds theaters, actually, the Loews Theaters. Fox, which becomes 20th Century Fox. Warner Brothers and RKO Radio Pictures. And then the 3 minors: Universal Pictures, Columbia, and United Artists. They form for us the classic Hollywood system. The low-budget filmmakers that are out there on the periphery, they exist in a place called Poverty Row. These are Republic, Monogram, Grand National, PRC, Eagle Lion, Allied Artists, which is Monogram under a different name, and American International. The Department of Justice Paramount case in 1948, what that did was break up that oligopoly. It told the theaters or the movie companies that you can't have all 3. You can't produce them and distribute them and show them. You have to give up one of those. So they all gave up their theaters. They decided that the money is in producing and distributing films, not in showing them. The average cost of film production over time, that's easy to think when they're spending $200 million now, the entire budget of a small country, to make a movie. rise of film artisans and independent producers. Old studios are now financiers and distributors of independently made films. The stars have master personas created by film studios. I'm not going to go through all of that right there, but that's essentially how the star works. And we emphasize one more time the sense of genre, that genre serves to stabilize an otherwise unstable movie industry. Okay, each new film banks on a number of familiar elements, motifs, and themes, but in a new way. It's, to borrow a phrase from music, it's theme and variation. We make one Western, but you know, there are lots and lots and lots of Westerns out there. We like this Western, and we like what we see. We want to go and see another Western. And then we get to the point where it said, I like that Western, but I don't like that one. But they're the same thing. And that's where we go, right to the Western, which is distinctly American. It is based on dime novels and real-life characters. There are three essential ingredients: the hero, the villain, and the landscape. Symbolism, East meets West, fact meets fiction, blah, blah. I can go on, blah, blah, blah. That's, look at that. The final frontier, space films. That's your modern Western. An American comedy, comic expression of social repression, that was discussed. The themes of American comedy, racism, social integration, and so forth. But we move on to the comedy actors. Keep this in mind, that silent comedy emphasized, obviously it had to, visual comedy. It was slapstick, exemplified by Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton. The early sound, then it became verbal wit, and they brought a lot of the sound, or comedians, for sound films from Broadway, from Hollywood. So you get, well, Laurel and Hardy weren't, but you get the Marx Brothers, who were very successful in the Coconuts on Broadway. And Laurel and Hardy, who were started with visual comedy and moved very easily into sound. Romantic and screwball comedy, which is a hybrid of the romantic and the slapstick. And the comedies that follow, they were all talked about those. And I'm, okay, we're down to the end. If you're confused, bewildered, rattled, depressed, and desperate, so am I. But stop by during office hours or send an email if you need something clarified. And remember that the study guide is now on Moodle. That will help you. And if you go through that study guide and you get confused about something, send an email. And that, yeah, it's on the web. Positively no makeup exams as we go through all of this. You're responsible, you know, for your exam. And this is the end. Whew. We made it with some time to spare. So, any questions for the good of the order? Oh, there must be, because I don't hear the music. There's no way I could have, I usually run overtime. Okay. All right, then we did it. Okay, remember, it starts Thursday, runs through Thursday, and everybody enjoy it and have a good time. Well, I don't know. It's whenever they...
Lane Online. Learn, unlearn, relearn.